Okay, so now that we're done with the triangular ridges, we're going to go into the secondary ridges, and that will be done with the blue wax. So as we can see, we left as much space as we could in between the triangular ridges. So now we're gonna try to get in there with the blue wax. If we can't do any secondary ridges, then we'll end up puddling it in and kind of making a developmental groove in those areas. So here we're going to first fill these empty areas with some blue wax to create a bed for the anatomical structures. So this is what I like to call puddling it in. So make a little puddle of wax and kind of fill the areas that are super deep. So right there. And after that we can start making our secondary anatomy, or our developmental grooves. Let's take this off. You don't really need the articulator for puddling in. Because normally the secondary anatomy does not make contact. Just make sure you don't wipe out your contact points. You can go back to the red, of course, a little bit, because there's some places, like over here, is kind of too deep. Just be very careful when you're adding to it, so you don't mess up your contact points. Remember, we just have to do it a little bit, and that will puddle in those areas that are too sharp. Okay, now if we want to add secondary anatomy, you have to make sure that you decrease the temperature a little bit on this instrument, or if you're using no flame, just don't heat up your instruments so much. Now that we reduce the heat, we can actually add some secondary anatomy. Make sure that with the secondary anatomy you do put it back onto the articulator and double check that it does not interfere. With our occlusion. So that's our secondary ridge there on that tooth. We wait for it to solidify a bit before we try to carve. So what we'll do is we're going to slowly carve our developmental grooves. Don't use too much force, you may end up breaking some of the tooth structure away. So with the secondary anatomy, remember it doesn't break through the peripheral ridge of the tooth, so we kind of just make the groove sharp on the very bottom of the of the triangular ridge, and then just kind of fade it out towards the peripheral ridge. Make sure you take a look at it from the side, and if it kind of looks weird, make it look a little nicer. Kind of round, sharper areas, like right here. I'm using a little bit of heat there. And then when we put it back on the articulator, we will double check the contact on the that first premolar. We want to make sure that that cusp tip is right on the marginal ridge here. Right here. Okay, so I'm gonna add a little bit. I'm gonna add a little green wax right here. And make sure that we have our contact point right on the cusp tip and the marginal ridge of the opposing tooth. And we have it right there. So now we'll just kind of smooth it out a little bit. Smooth out our secondary anatomy. And then we move on to the next one. So let's take this off for now. Add a little secondary ridge there. A little secondary ridge there. Maybe add a little to the point angle here with some green wax. Puddle it in a little bit right there. So we only have little tiny ridges there, very slightly. They don't have to be extremely sharp. And then on the lingual, we're just going to puddle it in since there's not much room here. It's going to make a little depression on the triangular groove areas. To accent this little ridge over here. Like I said, please do not heat the wax too much because it's going to just wash everything out. So let's try it onto the articulator. Then we're going to take a look real close, see if we have any contact on those ridges. We don't, so we can do a little bit more finessing on it. Just like that. And then we can refine the marginal ridge a little bit. Divide it off from the other tooth. And then let's check the height of this distal cusp. This seems okay. Now just double check, make sure our lingual surface is down to the tooth. Make sure it doesn't stick out too far lingual. Let's go over everything here. It seems to be a little deficient, so we're going to add a little more blue there. Let's add the lingual developmental groove here, and then the mesial and the distal marginal grooves. Right here and right here. Okay, let's try it back on the articulator. So once we establish that it's good, we have contact, then we move on to the next tooth. This little area here is a little weird. You see right here, this point angle is not quite in the right place, so let's round this off a little bit. And then sure that there's nothing sticking out on the buccal side. Take a look at it from the side. It looks a little better. So let's do our developmental grooves here. There's our central groove, buccal groove, mesial triangular groove, and distal groove here, distal triangular groove here, and then we have the distal lingual triangular groove there. We have our lingual groove here. Remember not to make the grooves too straight. Straight grooves signify a very geometric, artificial look to it. So just wiggle it a little bit here and there. And when you're doing the central groove and you're splitting off to another groove from the center, don't make it so similar to the other grooves. Try to get it so that it's kind of almost random looking. And then we have mesial marginal groove there. Split this off a little bit. We have the distal marginal groove there. And that looks pretty good. I don't think we need too many secondary ridges there. You can probably do maybe one here, just to make it look similar to the tooth right next to it. Just like that. The distal one doesn't really need one. And then here we can just kind of puddle it in a little bit right here, just to smooth it out. And we can maybe smooth out this marginal ridge there. And we didn't touch any of the contact points, so that's what we're looking for. Now we put it back. We can listen to the clicking. So there's 3 of the teeth. So basically we'll just move on through all of them, just in the same fashion as we just did here. Okay, so let's move on to the second molar. You know what, we'll do the same thing with the second molar. We're going to do the grooves first. So here's your buccal groove. This is the division between the transverse ridge here. And the division is to divide off the mesial, the distal buccal triangular ridge from the distal lingual triangular ridge. And then we go next. Next is the buccal groove. Notice we're going like in a wiggly fashion, just right through the peripheral ridge. The difference between the secondary grooves and developmental grooves are the fact that the developmental grooves break through the peripheral ridge. Right through, you see? Right there. So I guess the triangular grooves, they're more like secondary grooves because they kind of just divide or border the triangular ridges, but they don't really break through the peripheral ridge. The mesial and the distal marginal grooves, however, do. This here is a little bit too low, so we're going to raise up that ridge right there. And once we raise that ridge, we have to put it back on the articulator so we can double check the contacts. Sometimes if the contacts are too hard, we may have to lower the ridges back down. Let's see. No, they don't touch, so let's go back down. Alright, where were we? Right here. And remember, only go up to the adjacent teeth, no higher than that, because then the patient will flag it with their tongue that it's uncomfortable. Okay, let's see. Yeah, there's no contact, and if we notice it, that ridge here is right in the embrasure, sort of, so it's kind of hard for that ridge to become in contact. So what we do is we just bring it up to the level of the tooth, and that's where we'll end it. Now here we raised up the ridge, so we have a deeper area now, so what we'll do is puddle that area in. Like so. And let's fill this in a little bit more here. Just because this ridge here is kind of ended up too sharp, so we have to kind of round it down a little bit. Remember, you see how what just happened? I broke it off because I didn't wait long enough for it to solidify. So let's wait for it a little bit, and then we can slowly kind of divide the two teeth. Here we have to cut it back down because we just added a little to cover that area. So now we gotta go back and make sure that the lingual contour of the tooth is in line with our wax. Now, if you want to, now let's just sharpen this buccal developmental groove a little bit. Then we can probably do like a tiny little ridge right here. It might be not enough space, so let's just stick with it and the way we had it, just puddled in a little. Then we have this area here. Again, make sure you have that contact still there. Just make sure embrasures are clean. Occlusal as well as buccal as well as lingual. Okay, so we can take a little brush and kind of brush out all the wax that we left behind. Now very closely we're going to look and see if we still have our anatomy. Anatomy is there. I'm not so sure that this tooth has enough contact, so we're going to go back and we're going to re-smooth those areas and then recheck the contacts. Alright, so we're gonna go here and kind of melt it a little bit just on the surface. Then we contact again. Okay, we still have the contact, it's right there. Now let's do the lingual one. Okay, close it. Okay, that's there too. So I think we're in good shape. I'm gonna go here and puddle everything in. Alright. These are really deep in there. Usually this happens when we remove a lot of material from the occlusion, more than what we really need. So in these cases we really have to puddle these in really good. Gotta fill in those deep areas. If we don't, then our grooves are not going to be visible, and natural teeth aren't that deep anyhow. Just like I said before, observe where your contact points are and try to avoid them. This way we don't have to go back and refine everything. Okay, so let's go back to the other side on the lingual. Gonna do the same thing there. Gonna have to go back and refine this area here. So I just dripped a little bit of wax on there. Sometimes it happens when you're going too fast. These areas are going to be very small here. So we'll probably just end up puddling them in and then making our grooves. A lot of times a nice depression instead of a groove will make the tooth look actually a lot better. And of course sometimes it's better for the patient, because then you won't have any deep grooves catching food. Although this is an exercise, so a lot of times the technicians don't really do this kind of build up. This is just so we can actually learn where our contact areas should be ideally. Again, we still preserved our contact points. Here, 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 there, here, here. Add a little more here. It's a little bit deep. So we can puddle in a little bit. We can do the same with the triangular ridges, but now with the triangular ridges we have to be super careful, because we can very easily destroy our contact points. Okay, let's see here. Right there. Can add a little bit more. Since we know we don't have any contact here, we can just make it look nice. Just kind of make this triangular ridge a little bit closer to the central groove. And then just puddle it in a little bit. Okay. Remember, when you're doing this, do it with the red wax. And then if you're puddling in the secondaries, then you do that with blue wax. Okay, so now we go back a little bit, and now all we have to do is refine our developmental grooves a little bit. Remember, developmental grooves do what? They break through the peripheral ridge. Secondary grooves kind of fade out as they approach the peripheral ridge. Central groove, buccal groove. Just come right through, right to the facial, and then kind of refine it at the facial, where it really turns into like a depression rather than a groove. This area here is too wide, if you notice, so we're going to fill that in. We're supposed to have filled that in with green wax, so that's what we're gonna do. Let's get that a little bit shallower. Then we can go to the tip a little to refine our cusp tips. And then use the blue wax to fill it out in the lingual portion. Add a little bit of wax here. And let's add a tiny bit to the marginal ridge. And then we're going to check